There's this lie we're fed early in life, that if you're alone, something's wrong with you. That if you're not constantly surrounded by people, entertained by friends, validated by relationships, then you're losing in life. That kind of thinking is poison. It's a script you didn't write, but started living by default. And the truth is that belief has kept you from discovering the most powerful version of yourself. Let's flip the switch right now. Being alone doesn't mean being lonely. And it sure as hell doesn't mean being broken. What if I told you that some of the most powerful transformations in human history didn't happen in a crowd? They happened in the dark. They happened in silence. They happened when the world walked away and someone finally turned inward. But first, you've got to understand this. You are not the only one navigating solitude. You're not the first to sit in silence and feel that empty echo. You're not the first to question your worth when the calls stop coming, when the texts dry up, when the energy around you shifts and all that's left is you and your thoughts. This is part of the human experience. The moment you realize that, it stops being personal and starts being powerful. You're not isolated. You're in the company of every person who's ever gone through a season of solitude and come out transformed. Most people look around and think, why am I alone? Why me? But what if you asked a better question? One that empowered you instead of defeated you? What if you asked, what is this space trying to teach me? What strength am I being forced to discover right now? Because questions direct your focus, and where focus goes, energy flows. If you're asking low-quality questions, you'll get low-quality emotions. But if you raise the quality of your questions, your entire emotional state transforms. There's a moment in your life when you've got to stop chasing external noise to validate your internal world. Too many people are addicted to distraction. They keep swiping, scrolling, running from the very thing that could set them free, themselves. They fear being alone because they've never learned to be with their own thoughts without judgment. They don't know how to sit in stillness without attacking themselves. But the truth is that silence, that solitude, it's not your enemy, it's your invitation. When you realize you're not alone in your aloneness, you start to feel something shift inside. A pressure lifts, that shame, that guilt. It begins to dissolve. You recognize that millions of people across the globe are going through exactly what you're going through. But the ones who rise, the ones who grow, the ones who transform, they're the ones who choose to use solitude as a tool, not a prison. Being alone gives you access to something most people never tap into. Your true voice, not the voice of your friends, not the voice of your parents, not the voice of society screaming who you should be, what you should do, how you should act. Your voice, that's who you meet in solitude. That's who you finally get to hear when the volume of the world goes down. And when you tap into that voice, when you finally get real with yourself, everything changes. You stop needing people to complete you, and instead, you invite people into your life who complement you. There's a big difference. Completion implies lack. But when you're whole, when you know who you are, you're no longer begging for attention. You're attracting alignment. But none of that can happen if you keep seeing solitude as some kind of curse. You've got to reframe it. You've got to condition your mind to see the beauty in it. Because whatever you label it, you'll experience it as. If you label being alone as lonely, you'll feel pain. But if you label it as freedom, space, clarity, healing, you create a completely different emotional experience. This is the first step to being happy alone. You realize that everyone you've ever admired, every leader, every creator, every visionary, they've all had seasons of solitude and not just tolerated them, but embraced them because they knew what most people never learn, that greatness is born in the quiet. It's built in the space where no one is watching, where there's no applause, no feedback, just the internal fire of someone committed to becoming who they were always meant to be. So you want to be happy alone. Start by recognizing you're not the only one who's walked this path. You're not broken. You're not behind. You're just at the beginning of something extraordinary. Something most people will never allow themselves to feel because they're too busy distracting themselves from discomfort. But you've got a shot to go deeper, to rewire, to rebuild, to reconnect with who you are without needing the world to validate it. And the moment you make peace with that, the moment you realize that your season of solitude isn't a punishment, it's preparation, everything shifts. Most people are terrified of being alone because they've been trained to equate solitude with suffering. They've been conditioned to believe that silence means insignificance, that if no one's texting, calling, liking, or showing up, then they don't matter. But that's not truth, that's programming. And the moment you realize that, you take your power back. Because solitude, when chosen and embraced, isn't weakness. It's where the strongest version of you is born. Let's get one thing straight. Solitude is not isolation. Isolation is when you withdraw out of fear. Solitude is when you step away out of power. It's a conscious decision to go inward, to cut through the noise, to recalibrate your energy. In a world addicted to stimulation, solitude is rebellion. It's defiance against the idea that you need to be constantly connected to be complete. It's proof that you don't need noise to feel alive. You just need presence. Think about it. When was the last time you were truly alone? No distractions, no background noise, no scrolling, just you. Breathing, feeling, being. Most people can't handle it. They rush to fill the space. They check their phone every few minutes. They open up 10 tabs on their browser, bounce between songs, conversations, apps, because sitting with themselves is too much. But that discomfort, that tension, that's where the breakthrough lives. That's the doorway to clarity, to confidence, to control over your own mind. The world will try to convince you that you're valuable because of what you do for others. But solitude reminds you that your value exists even when no one's watching, even when no one's clapping, even when you're not on. You have worth, not because of your productivity, not because of your popularity, but because of your presence, because of who you are when everything else is stripped away. Solitude is the training ground for self-leadership. You don't build discipline when people are watching. You build it when no one sees you do the reps. You don't develop mental toughness in a group. You develop it when you're in your own mind and decide not to quit. When you sit in that quiet and refuse to run from your own thoughts. When you feel the pressure and stay in the fire until you learn how to breathe through it. That's where resilience is born, and this is the part most people never get to. Solitude sharpens your intuition. When you're constantly surrounded by voices, opinions, input, advice, you drown out your own. But when you unplug, when you get still, you start to hear that quiet whisper inside, that voice that says, this is who you are, this is what you want, this is what matters. It's been there the whole time, but it's been buried under obligation, expectation, distraction. Solitude uncovers it, and once you start trusting it, your entire decision-making process shifts. You stop second-guessing. You stop asking everyone else for permission. You start moving with authority because you know, and it's not just mental. Solitude rewires you emotionally. It teaches you how to self-regulate. Most people outsource their peace. They need someone else to calm them down, make them feel seen, make them feel okay. But when you master solitude, you become your own sanctuary. You become the source of your own stability. You stop reacting to every external shift, and you start responding from a place of grounded power. That's what emotional independence looks like. There's a reason why the most powerful people in history all valued time alone. Visionaries, leaders, creatives. They understood that solitude was the birthplace of innovation. You don't create breakthroughs in a crowd. You don't tap into your genius surrounded by noise. You go deep when you go inward. You access levels of thought and imagination and perspective that can't be reached when your attention is fractured. Solitude doesn't just give you space, it gives you access. Access to the parts of yourself that you forgot existed. And here's what makes it a true superpower. It's always available to you. You don't need money for it. You don't need credentials. You don't need approval. All you need is the willingness to be still, to be real, to be present with the moment, with yourself, without judgment. And in that space, you start to remember what you're capable of. Most people chase connection without ever connecting to themselves. They look for love, for validation, for identity in other people, because they've never spent time getting to know who they are at their core. But solitude flips that. It forces the mirror in your face. It says, who are you when no one's clapping? Who are you when there's no performance? And that moment, when you choose to show up for yourself without an audience, that's when you start becoming unstoppable. Because once you learn to love solitude, no one can manipulate you with abandonment. Once you become your own source of joy, peace, and purpose, you stop accepting crumbs from people who can't meet you where you are. You stop tolerating anything that's less than alignment. You stop compromising on your standards to avoid being alone, because you're no longer afraid of it. You own it. Solitude doesn't make you smaller. It expands you. It stretches you beyond distraction. It challenges you to meet the real you, not the version curated for others. And when you lean into that, when you stop running and start embracing it, you find a power most people never tap into. The power to think clearly, to feel deeply, to choose deliberately, to become someone who's not just surviving without others, but thriving in your own energy. Everything in your life, your relationships, your success, your fulfillment, your peace, starts with one thing: how you treat yourself. How you speak to yourself when no one's around, what you believe about yourself when the lights go out. Because the truth is, you are in a lifelong relationship with the person in the mirror. And if that relationship is toxic, nothing else you build outside of it will ever feel like enough. Most people are obsessed with seeking love from others. They want connection, validation, belonging. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's human. But the problem starts when they chase those things to fill a void they've never filled from within. You can't expect someone else to treat you better than you treat yourself. You can't demand loyalty, respect, and love from others if you're constantly disrespecting yourself with your thoughts, your choices, and your standards. That's the truth most people don't want to face. See, when you're alone, you can't hide from your own energy. You can't perform. You can't distract. You're stuck with yourself. And that's exactly why solitude is such a mirror. It reflects how you really feel about who you are. If that reflection is full of judgment, criticism, doubt, shame, then that becomes your emotional baseline. That's what you walk into every room carrying. That's what you bring into your relationships, your work, your dreams. You're coloring the world around you with the brush of your inner dialogue. That's why this work matters. You can't fake inner peace. You can't Photoshop self-respect. You either have it or you don't, and the good news, you can build it. You can rewire the way you treat yourself. You can shift your internal conversation. You can stop being your biggest critic and start becoming your greatest ally. But it takes intention. It takes awareness. It takes choosing to become conscious of the patterns you've let run unchecked for years. You've got to ask yourself, how do I speak to myself when I fail? When I fall short? When I'm struggling? Do I attack? Do I shrink? Do I spiral? Or do I show up with compassion, strength, and truth? Because how you show up for yourself in those moments determines your self-worth. Not the highlight reels, not the wins, not the applause, but those dark moments where it's just you and your doubt. That's where real confidence is built. Your relationship with yourself sets the tone because it creates your internal thermostat. That thermostat regulates how much love, success, and joy you allow into your life. If you don't believe you're worthy of something, you'll sabotage it, you'll push it away, you'll convince yourself it was luck or a fluke or someone else's blessing. But when you value yourself, truly value yourself, you stop questioning whether or not you deserve good things. You just receive them, you just step into them, you stop overthinking and start owning. This isn't about ego. It's not about becoming arrogant or inflated. It's about becoming honest. When you're honest with yourself, you don't ignore your flaws. You face them. You don't pretend you have it all together, but you know you're committed to growth. You don't wait for the world to approve of you because you already know where you stand with yourself. That's what gives you power. That's what gives you peace. That's what gives you presence. The way you treat yourself also teaches other people how to treat you. You set the standard. If you're constantly putting yourself down, others will too. If you always say yes when you mean no, others will learn to push your boundaries. But when you love yourself enough to honor your limits, to speak your truth, to protect your peace, you begin to attract people who do the same. Your external world starts to reflect your internal standards. When you're alone, that's your training ground. That's where you practice self-respect. That's where you learn to enjoy your own company. That's where you become someone you're proud to be around, and that doesn't happen through perfection. It happens through presence, through showing up for yourself every single day with discipline, compassion, and belief. Even when you don't feel like it, especially when you don't feel like it. The relationship you have with yourself is the foundation for everything else in your life. If it's cracked, unstable, neglected, everything built on top of it will feel fragile. You'll keep chasing achievements hoping they'll fix how you feel inside. You'll keep jumping from one relationship to another hoping someone else will make you feel whole. But it never works because wholeness isn't given, it's built from within, and it starts with the decision to treat yourself like someone worth loving, worth believing in, worth fighting for. When you begin to value yourself, you raise your energy, and when you raise your energy, you shift what you attract. Life begins to open up not because it changed, but because you did. You started showing up differently. You started choosing differently. You started living from a place of alignment instead of approval. And that shift changes everything. Happiness doesn't just show up. Fulfillment doesn't randomly land in your lap. Confidence doesn't wake up with you by accident. These are not gifts. They're decisions. They're daily disciplines. They're states you must learn to design, master, and live in with intention. Because if you don't decide the state you live in, the world will do it for you. And let me tell you, most of the world is in a state of stress, fear, and scarcity. If you don't lead your mind will lead you straight into a life that doesn't feel like yours. Your emotional state is like the operating system behind every choice you make. It controls your reactions, your relationships, your productivity, your health, everything. Most people walk around believing that their emotions are automatic, that their moods are random, that some days are just bad days. But the truth is, they're not bad days. They're poorly designed states. And the difference between someone who feels alive and someone who feels stuck, it's not luck. It's not the circumstances. It's who takes control of their state first. Your state is a triad. It's made up of three things: what you focus on, the language you use, and the physiology you live in. You want to change how you feel, you've got to master these three every single day. Let's start with focus. What you focus on, you feel. If you focus on what's missing, what's wrong, what you can't control, you'll feel overwhelmed, you'll feel frustrated, you'll feel like a victim. But if you train your mind to focus on what you do have, what's strong instead of what's wrong, what you can control instead of what you can't, your whole emotional state shifts. Focus is a muscle, and just like your body, if you don't train it, it defaults to weakness. People who are alone often spiral because they focus on what they lack. They obsess over what they don't have: companionship, connection, love, and they reinforce that focus until it becomes a story. And once something becomes a story, it becomes a belief, and beliefs run your life. If you believe that being alone equals being empty, then solitude becomes suffering. But if you focus on what this season of life is giving you: time, clarity, space, power, then solitude becomes sacred. Your focus builds your filter, and your filter becomes your reality. Then there's language. The words you use are the commands you give your nervous system. Most people don't even realize how violent their language is. They say things like, "I'm broken," "I'm lost," "I can't handle this," "no one cares," and they repeat those phrases until they become identity. But language is a choice, and when you shift your language, you shift your life. Instead of saying, "I'm alone," what if you said, "I'm in a season of becoming"? Instead of saying, "I'm stuck," what if you said, "I'm in transition"? It's not about lying to yourself, it's about leading yourself. It's about interrupting the pattern that keeps you in emotional chains. The words you speak, especially to yourself, are the most powerful tools you have. They're shaping your reality in real time. So if you want to create a new emotional state, you've got to upgrade your vocabulary. You've got to stop using words that weaken you and start using words that energize, empower, and expand you. Because your language doesn't just describe your life, it builds it. And finally, there's physiology. Your body is the fastest way to shift your state. If you want to feel depressed, you already know how: shallow breathing, hunched posture, downward gaze, slow movement. Your body has a recipe for every emotion. The question is, are you using that recipe consciously or unconsciously? If you want to change how you feel, change how you move, change how you breathe, change how you stand. Emotion is created by motion. Your body leads your brain more than your brain leads your body. Most people wait to feel good before they act strong, but that's backward. You act strong and you feel good. You move like you're confident and confidence shows up. It's not about pretending. It's about priming your nervous system to fire in the direction you want. Every day when you wake up, you're given a blank slate. But if you don't design your state, you'll fall back into default patterns. Old wiring, old stories, old limitations. Your brain is a survival machine. It's not designed to make you happy. It's designed to keep you safe. And safety often means staying small, staying still, staying scared. So if you want to feel joy, power, peace, you've got to overrule that programming. You've got to build new emotional muscles every single day, just like you train your body at the gym. This is where most people fall off. They think emotional health is a one-time insight. They read a book, watch a video, have a breakthrough, and then go back to living by default. But your emotional state is like hygiene. You don't shower once and expect to smell fresh for a week. You don't brush your teeth once and expect clean breath forever. You've got to do it daily. Same goes for your mind. Same goes for your heart. You don't wait until you feel bad to manage your state. You build the habit of getting into a powerful state before the world has a chance to pull you into a weak one. When you commit to designing your state daily, you reclaim control. You no longer wait for someone else to make you happy. You no longer let circumstances dictate your worth. You step into each day with intention, energy, and ownership. That's how emotional mastery is built, not by accident, but by design. When you're alone, you're given the most powerful gift a human being can receive, the freedom to create without compromise. This is your moment, your blank canvas, your raw material, and what you do with it will define everything. Most people see being alone as something to endure, something to tolerate. But what if it's the exact opposite? What if this is your time to build, to forge a life so aligned, so powerful, so fulfilling, that when people walk into it, they're not rescuing you, they're witnessing you? You've got to stop waiting for life to excite you and start becoming the architect of a life that naturally pulls you out of bed. Excitement doesn't come from comfort. It comes from growth, from movement, from living in a state of pursuit, of creation, of purpose. When you build a life that excites you, you don't need motivation. You don't need external pressure. You become internally driven. You wake up with fire because you know the life you're building reflects who you are, not who you were told to be. The problem is, most people haven't given themselves permission to ask what they really want. They've spent so long reacting to life that they've forgotten how to design it. They've been stuck in survival mode, handling responsibilities, chasing approval, avoiding judgment. But when you're alone, when the noise dies down, when it's just you, you finally have the space to ask the big question: what would a life I'm obsessed with actually look like? That question changes everything. It demands honesty, it requires courage, and it activates your imagination. See, your brain is a goal-seeking machine, but if you don't give it a target, it will default to comfort, to autopilot, to the same routines, the same people, the same patterns. That's not living, that's existing. And you weren't born to just exist. You were born to expand. But expansion doesn't happen by accident. It happens when you trade predictability for possibility. When you start building a life that excites you, you shift your energy. You stop waiting for people to invite you into their lives because you're too busy building your own. You stop trying to fit into spaces that don't feel right because you've got your own blueprint, your own rhythm, your own vision, and that's the power of solitude. It gives you the space to reconnect with that vision, to strip away the noise, the pressure, the roles you've been playing, and ask, what do I actually want? Maybe it's launching a business. Maybe it's mastering a craft. Maybe it's traveling the world, writing a book, learning a new skill, getting into the best shape of your life. It doesn't matter what it is. It matters that it lights you up. Because when you're lit up from within, you stop chasing excitement and start becoming the source of it. That's how you create momentum. That's how you shift out of stagnation. You stop waiting for something to change and you become the change. And here's what most people miss. The goal isn't just to be busy. It's not to pack your calendar with endless tasks or fill your time so you don't feel lonely. That's just distraction dressed up as progress. The real goal is to align your time with your values, to build rituals, habits, and projects that move your life in the direction of your vision. That means being intentional, ruthless even. You stop saying yes to things that drain you. You start prioritizing what matters, and you stop apologizing for choosing your path. That's when you realize happiness doesn't come from others. It comes from alignment, from living a life that makes sense to your soul, that resonates with your deepest desires, that reflects your truest self. And when you start building that kind of life, people feel it. You radiate differently, not because you're trying to impress anyone, but because you're finally connected to something real. You've also got to understand, excitement isn't just about big wins or major milestones. It's about the process. It's about waking up with purpose. It's about knowing your actions today are building your future. That every workout, every journal entry, every project, every decision, it all matters. It's not about perfection, it's about direction. And as long as you're moving in the direction of a life that excites you, you're already winning. When you don't have people around to validate you, you become the validator. When no one's clapping for you, you clap for yourself. That's the muscle you build in solitude. You learn to be proud of the process, not just the outcome. You learn to celebrate your discipline, your growth, your effort. That kind of internal celebration is powerful because it's not dependent on anyone else. And when you build a life based on that, on self-trust, self-celebration, and self-direction, loneliness turns into liberation. You stop trying to fill your life with noise and start filling it with meaning. You stop numbing out and start dialing in. You become so engaged with your own evolution that the idea of being alone doesn't feel like punishment anymore. It feels like privilege, like the raw, fertile soil from which greatness is born, because that's exactly what it is. A season, a portal, a sacred space where you get to turn inward, get honest, get real, and build something extraordinary, something that feels like you at your highest level. And from there, anything becomes possible. There's a myth out there that says connection only happens when you're with others, that without someone next to you, talking to you, hugging you, seeing you, you're somehow disconnected. But that's not the truth. Real connection starts long before anyone else shows up. It begins with your ability to be fully present with yourself, with your surroundings, with the moment you're in right now. Because if you can't connect to this moment, you'll never connect deeply with any moment. And that's why people feel alone even in crowded rooms. That's why people jump from relationship to relationship and still feel empty. It's not a lack of people. It's a lack of presence. Presence is power. It's the gateway to every real experience in life. When you're present, you're alive, you feel, you listen. You experience life in real time, not through the lens of the past or the fear of the future. Most people are stuck in their heads, disconnected from their hearts, their breath, their bodies, their spirit. They're physically there, but mentally somewhere else. They're talking, but not really hearing. They're looking, but not really seeing. And when you live like that long enough, of course you feel alone. Because the deepest connection you've lost is with yourself. Solitude isn't the enemy, disconnection is. And the antidote to disconnection isn't another person, it's presence. That means being fully engaged with whatever you're doing, washing the dishes, going for a walk, reading a book, breathing deeply. When you bring presence to those moments, they become sacred. They become nourishing. They start to fill you up from the inside out. And suddenly, you're not craving someone else to distract you or validate you because you're grounded. You're here. And here is where all the magic happens. Presence requires intention. You've got to choose it. In a world of noise, distractions, notifications, scrolling, and overstimulation, presence is a radical act. It means saying, I'm not going to numb out. I'm not going to run. I'm not going to miss my life while looking at everyone else's. That choice alone creates power. It pulls your energy back from the outside world and roots it in now. because now is where joy lives. Now is where clarity is born. Now is where your power resides. You can't be connected to anyone, friends, lovers, family, if you don't first know how to connect with yourself. If you don't know how to sit in silence and listen to your own breath. If you can't sit still without grabbing your phone. If you can't be alone without filling the space with noise. That silence you keep avoiding, that's your meeting with truth. That's where your real work begins. That's where your real relationship begins, with you. And when you master presence with yourself, everything else changes. Conversations get deeper, time slows down, your senses heighten, you begin to notice things, your emotions, your intuition, the way the light hits the wall, the rhythm of your thoughts, the beauty in simplicity. You begin to see that connection was never about people being around. It was about you being around, you being awake, you being here. You don't need constant stimulation to feel alive. You need engagement. You need immersion. You need to be with your life, not just watching it go by. That's the tragedy of most people. They miss their own lives because they're chasing a feeling they could have created by simply slowing down and dropping in. That feeling of not enough, that chronic emptiness, it's not a symptom of being alone. It's a symptom of not being present while you're alone. This is why meditation matters. This is why breath work matters. This is why nature matters. These practices aren't luxuries. They're pathways back to presence. They're reminders that the mind doesn't run the show unless you let it, that your worth isn't measured by your productivity or your popularity, but by your ability to be, to notice, to feel, to experience. That's the root of all fulfillment. Presence is also where healing begins, when you're fully present with your pain, not avoiding it, not numbing it, not intellectualizing it. You allow it to move. Emotions are energy. They're meant to flow, but when you resist them, they stagnate. They build. They create anxiety, depression, disconnection. But when you sit with them in presence, with breath, with stillness, with courage, they start to pass. And in that process, you become someone new, someone lighter, stronger, more connected to the core of who you are. People think presence is passive, that it's just sitting there doing nothing. But presence is active. It takes strength to stay, to remain, to feel. When you feel everything, the joy, the sorrow, the boredom, the excitement, you stop needing to run from anything. And when you stop running, you finally arrive. In yourself, in your power, in your life. Connection doesn't begin when someone texts you back. It doesn't begin when your schedule is full or your bed isn't empty. It begins the moment you arrive in your own body. The moment you bring your awareness to your breath. The moment you stop wishing for something else and meet life as it is. That moment is sacred. That moment is you. And from that place, connection flows naturally. It's not something you chase. It's something you radiate. When you're present, your energy changes. You stop needing to prove, to impress, to perform. You simply are, and that being is magnetic. That presence draws the right people in, the right opportunities, the right moments, but even more importantly, it draws you in. It brings you home, because presence isn't something you achieve. It's something you remember, something you return to, something that was always there, waiting for you to slow down long enough to feel it. So here's the truth: being alone is not a curse. It's not a flaw. It's not something to escape. It's a sacred invitation. A call to rise. A call to remember who you are when no one's looking. Because if you can fall in love with your own presence, if you can master your emotional state, if you can create joy from within, build a life that excites you, and stay grounded in presence, then you become unshakable. You stop chasing love and start attracting it. You stop waiting to be chosen and realize you already chose you. This is where power begins, not in the applause, not in the validation, not in the company of others. Power begins when you can stand in an empty room and feel full, fulfilled, alive, free, because now you're not afraid of being alone. You're built for it. You've used it. You've transformed through it. And when someone does walk into your life, they're not meeting someone half finished, waiting to be completed. They're meeting someone whole, someone grounded, someone on fire. That's when love becomes powerful. That's when relationships become sacred, because you're not giving from need, you're giving from overflow. So don't run from the silence. Don't fear the stillness. Use this time. Design your state. Create your rituals. Build your vision. Become the source of your own joy. That's how you stop just surviving and start thriving. That's how you become not just happy alone, but invincible alone. And from that place, anything becomes possible.